He's been the editor and writer about lots and lots of things having to do with the Japanese-Canadian community. He's a poet who snuck up on us old-timers before we knew it was happening. And his connection with Talon Books is a wonderful and significant one because he edited Roy Keoka's collected poems, big, beautiful book called Pacific Windows that Talon Books had the nerve and the sense to publish a few years ago. So I'd like to give you my friend, Roy Miki.
And this last poem is for Robin Blaser, an old friend and my first teacher in Vancouver. We often queried the early evening light when the sense of another era courted the maple trees canopying the street. A quiet snail about to cross the sidewalk made for a parable in an otherwise lame attempt to conjure the comfort of rhyme. The shoe store had all versions of designer runners that the market would bear as I looked down at the bathos of my own. There must be a designer body awaiting on the other side of the makeshift percept that came to mind and then exited stage left. The perspective of the sea in the distance with the sky designed by power lines, don't Photoshop them out. Please, not until later. The dissolve deludes us into thinking the street is a coach that pulls into town at noon bringing news of the war on other shores. The terror that contains error comes out of the blue corridors where horsemen trample the disappearing bodies on the other side. In the silence of the mannequin is the location that reaches toward the latest buzzwords that fork out more than monetary conflagrations. The tyranny of the commodity prods its arms and torso to hang loose while the garments hang tight on headlines unfurled in the doorway. The ink had already dried when the internal combustion engines disseminated their gaseous opulence as if the reeds could be so mollified. Beads of the rampant hoardiness marked the boundaries of designer ramparts that allocated symptoms to rueful dispatches. The restive figures rustled the leaves that forgot to cling to branches in the time taken for the snail to make it to the other side. Thank you.
I'd say a few words about Talon Books first, about the relationship between Talon Books and poetry. Talon started off as a magazine by a high school kid named David Robinson at McGee High School and started it up in 1963, which was just about the time when the Tisch crowd moved to all kinds of different cities to create poetry elsewhere. And then 4 years later, Talon published its first book of poetry,